Hello, JJ Meets World listeners. This episode is about true crime. That's right. It's a true crime episode of JJ Meets World where we talk about having things stolen from us and what it feels like after that. Sit back, relax, and look at your possessions and hold them close. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
All right, Tucker, let's talk about violations today, because yesterday I spent the bulk of my day helping a friend whose car was stolen out of his driveway. So, whoa. Yeah, let me paint a picture here for you.
How the topic is just violations.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it's just
Jesus. Okay,
because it feels okay.
When you say violations, you're not talking necessarily about infractions,
right? We're talking about the feeling of being violated and how you can't just wipe that away. So, I have a good friend who's actually been a guest several times. Let's call him Lil Plund. Okay.
Of course it was him.
Yep.
Of course it was him.
So on Friday night, I get a call from Lil, and he's like, "Hey, listen, that's
not how he sounded when he called you.
He told me you are the TV mount whisperer." And truthfully, I am. I'm really good at hanging television mounts. Like it's like a sixth sense to know exactly where on a wall any type of TV mount should be hung. In fact, recently I've helped some people move, and that's been the big request is like, "Hey, would you bring your stuff so that you could hang a new TV mount for me?" So I hang this TV mount, and he goes to his car, which is parked in his driveway, and he's got a driveway that goes up and back beyond where the house is.
Where in the vicinity does he live?
He lives a block from where I used to live. So he's just off a major thoroughfare, just off University, and just north of the old Agassiz School.
Okay.
And so, it's a well-established neighborhood. It's been around for a long time. Unfortunately, at this point, I think we kind of consider it sort of inner city.
That's interesting because that's even close to where my mom lives.
Right. It's actually in fact, I think he's on the same block as your mom, just several avenues down.
Okay.
So when I get there, he comes out and he grabs the TV mount out of the back of his car, and we go in through his backyard, his back gate, walk in through his backyard door, and I hold his baby for a little bit. He's got a newborn, not even a year old. And we hang out, I let his dog sniff me enough so that he won't be freaked out. And then we hang this TV mount and I leave. The next thing I know, I send him a message the next morning saying, "Hey, listen, let's buy Happy Joe's. Let's be the new owners of the Happy Joe's location in Fargo.
Please do."
Right? I mean, that's something that we've been seriously thinking about. And so now more information is out about the purchase of Happy Joe's and how we may acquire it. And he calls me, and I can tell immediately he's in a panic. And so he's out of breath, and he's trying to tell me what's going on. And he goes, "Somebody stole my car." And I was like, "Okay, so let me be the calm voice for you." And I'm like, "Okay, well, have you called the police?" He's like, "Yep, I called the police. They're on their way." I'm like, "Have you called your insurance company?" No, I got to call my insurance company. Okay. Where are you right now? He's like, "I'm walking up and down the street to see if anyone has cameras." I'm like, "Okay, so you don't have any cameras in your house. Tell me about how you found out it was stolen." Because let's be honest, it would not be impossible that he drove it somewhere the night before, had a really good time, and then took an Uber home, and it just happens to be sitting somewhere. And he goes, I took an Uber from my house down to your sister's house. So he was with my sister, and I took an Uber home. I'm like, okay, so we know that your car was in fact at your house the night before. And he goes, I don't know, maybe I left my keys in it. I can't remember. So I ask him questions like, okay, so what was in your car? What are the things you need to worry about? And he goes, I don't know. And so he starts listing some stuff, and he goes, nothing that's just horrible, but I need to like check, I need to check my whole car out. Like, I mean, I don't remember what's in it. Like, there could be important information. His key ring alone might have keys to their house, things like that.
Right.
So we continue the conversation, and I'm like, okay, you let me know if there's something I can do to help you, and call me back, like, if I can help you, because there's nothing worse than if you don't want to be on the phone while you're trying to do a million other things. So he called me back a little bit later, and he goes, they found the car. The Fargo Police Department showed up. They did a whole thing, and somehow they found the car. It was over at Tailgater's Sports Bar.
Okay.
Excuse me. So
I thought you were pausing for effect there. I thought you were telling me that nope, he had forgotten it there.
So so Tailgaters is roughly like 4 blocks from his house, and he said that it was in the parking lot of Tailgaters right in front of the front door, and according to the Tailgaters security footage, it arrived shortly after 2 a.m. Someone got out of the passenger seat and got into a white pickup that did not have a front license plate. So the cops say, okay, so we'll get this thing open, and then let's look at what's in there. They open it, and they find the car stealing tools as well as a thermos of marijuana.
Oh, okay.
Right? So these people had this car, and then they left. They did not leave the keys in the car. And so my thought was like, maybe it's joyriders, right? Maybe it's somebody who just like did this. But then you had to walk all the way up his driveway, right? Like, this wasn't just parked on the street. It wasn't like if you were walking on the sidewalk. You had to walk up the driveway, past his home, past a security light. And so this was intentionally stolen.
Wow. Yeah.
So now the problem is he's got his car back, but he doesn't have keys, and it's a fancy car. So they're able to actually open up the vehicle, and he can't find the keys. It's a new fancy car. So what's he have to do? Well, you got to call the dealership, right? So he calls the dealership, and now at this point, it's like 2:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday. So time is of the essence. And they say, yeah, to reprogram your keys, because these people still have the keys. So, of course, you don't want those to be active anymore. You don't want them to work on the vehicle.
Right.
So to do that, you need actually 2 new keys. And you use 2 new keys to reprogram the locks, and then you can start it. So my buddy says, okay, so do you have keys? And they're like, we don't have any of these new keys. Because we're a dealership and we only care about the sale.
Okay.
So he calls a bunch of other dealerships who deal for the same vehicle, and they're like, yeah, we've got 1 of those keys.
Oh, geez.
So we pick 1 key up locally. Now, he drives a GMC, but this is a Chevy key, and they're all, they're all the same family, but it's still kind of weird. $319 to get 1 key.
Damn.
Not even counting the like switch over. So then we find another key at a dealership in Grand Forks, 75 miles away. So then they're like, and we close at 5, and it's like 3:45. So if I drive and break the speed limit, I will make it to Grand Forks. So that's exactly what we do. We drive out to Grand Forks. We go, we get this key. We turn around, we come back, and we have the lock shop guys meet us at the dealership where the car is sitting at that exact moment. And he's like, okay, so, we have to, I'll do what I need to do to get the keys re-signaled and get the car to accept it. And I said, remember back in the day when all you needed was a coat hanger? And that's what got a car open? And he's like, yeah, it's different now. And then he pulls out this When I say like a Pelican box, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, basically like a hard shelled case that's meant to, protect the gear inside of it.
Right. And it's got like the foam inside. So he opens this up and there is a computer and just a rat's nest of cords with different ends and tips on it. And so he's got to plug all this stuff into the car. Meanwhile, the car is going beep, 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 because it's being opened without a key that it recognizes. It is also getting just chillier and chillier and chillier. So we're waiting out there, and the people at the dealership that this car got towed to are all leaving, and the keys don't end up working at the end of the day.
Oh, no.
I know, yeah. And so they're like, well, you're going to have to wait until Monday, and then the dealership can bring it in. And the dealership has got an even bigger computer that they can work with.
Oh, the computer wasn't big enough, huh?
Right, yeah, whatever it happened to be. And I was like,
sounds like our computer here is just too small.
Well, my buddy's like, remember the days when you could just give someone like $100 and they'd stay after and, do some stuff. But now they've got to have a whole work order and it's a big to do. And I'm like, yeah, that sucks, man. Big time. That sucks. So we finally get, and but he's able to get in the car and actually go through it and see, if anything's missing. And it doesn't appear that anything's missing. And I'm sort of like, well, what does it feel like to be in the car? And he goes, it feels different. I don't know if I can keep this car. Right. And it's pretty new to him. I mean, it's a 2021 vehicle, and I think he got it over the summer. And I go, I don't blame you one iota. And I told him a story from when I was in 4th grade, and my dad's car was stolen out of our garage.
Yeah, that's a crazy story.
Right? I mean, like this guy used an axe and chopped the window, like not broke the window, like chopped the molding of the window, got into our garage, stole the car. A week later, the Watford City Police across the entire state of North Dakota called and said, hey, we've got your vehicle. And my dad was just really anxious. And so we went out there to get the car, and they give you an inventory of everything that's in the car. And you're supposed to identify the things that are yours. And my dad was hoping his golf clubs would be in there. They were not. But you know what was? A giant stack of pornography. And I remember my dad kind of giving me a nudge. He's like, should I claim this? Should I claim this? There was also a half a roll of toilet paper that my dad had just in case, there was an emergency when he was driving back from the lake early morning, because he used to commute back and forth all the time. He did not claim that because he was too embarrassed.
Oh,
right. I know. And I'm like, so you're going to I was like, I kind of feel like anything you don't claim, this guy's going to get when he gets out of prison.
Right.
Right. Like they're like, step forward to the line. Man's wallet, $5.
That's 2-ply,
Right. Yeah. My dad didn't go for the cheap stuff. But I remember my dad having that car for maybe a month and then being like, nope, this doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel right. I remember the feeling inside of our house was, we need to put a new lock on the garage door because we just felt so violated. Mm-hmm. It just felt awful when someone had stolen something of yours. And,
someone's been in your personal private space.
Right. Without invitation.
Right. They invaded.
Have you ever had anything stolen from you, Tucker? Have you ever had an invasion of some kind?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to cars, I've never had a car stolen, but I've had cars broken into. The two times that come to mind, I don't know if it's been more than that. One was when I had the mystery machine back in high school, and someone...
they were clearly looking for dope inside that, right? They're like, this has got to be the home of some dope.
Right, and I had left it unlocked downtown, which was just stupid. And but there was nothing in it except for some loose change in the dash, and that's what they took. But there was nothing else to steal in it. It was like, what possessions did I have at that time besides that van? And then when I lived on Broadway in that one level, and I had a Ford Focus, I think. I must have left it unlocked and forgotten about that. And I knew it had gotten broken into because in the morning I go to get into it to drive to work. And not only is the seat all the way back and down as though someone was laying in it, but the inside of the car smells like cigarettes. And so I'm looking around going all right, someone clearly got in here last night. Did they take anything? And the only thing that they took was right underneath the steering column, there was like a computer port you could plug into.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this tracking device that had been sent to me by Progressive, where it was like, hey, if you think you're a really good driver, let us like track your driving habits. And if we can see that you are after like a month, then we'll lower your rate. And so I had that underneath there, and they stole that.
Weird.
And then when I contacted Progressive to replace it, they were like, yeah, well, that's going to be $50 to replace it. And I just like, yeah, you know what? Never mind. And so that was it. Yeah, that's all they took. I don't think I've ever had, I'm trying to think, have I had stuff that's really super valuable? No, stolen, not that I'm aware of. But there have been times where my vehicle got busted into.
When I was in 6th grade, my bike was stolen, and I hated that. It was like the end of innocence.
You know what? Yeah, that happened to me too, actually, now that I think about it. But mine was stolen and dismantled.
What?
Because I had forgotten it at school, in elementary school, on the last day of school. Because like it was on the last day of school, you're going to go on a trip somewhere. And so they told everyone to bring your bicycles. So we all brought our bikes in the morning, and then we went to like Mickelson Park or whatever, and then came back to Horseman for some final whatevers. And so I had locked my bike up, but had totally forgotten to then get it when I went home, because home was just a block away. So I was always walking home, and I was so elated that I was done with school for the year, right? Because it's summer break, that I went home, just didn't even think about it. And it wasn't until the next morning when I was like, I left my bike at school. And so my dad and I went back there, and we found the bike, but it was in pieces all over the schoolyard. And I remember I felt so bad. My dad got mad at me because I had forgotten the bike there. And I felt so bad and had an anxiety attack, my first one ever, which turned into basically like an asthma attack.
Oh my.
And it was rough. I felt like, someone had their hands on my bike and they took it apart, but they didn't steal anything. All they did was they just took it apart, and then they, scattered the parts all over the playground. So we were able to piece it back together after that.
That's weird. I mean, did you need tools to put it back together? Did someone be like, oh, it's a good thing I brought my wrench with me?
I mean, we took all the parts home, and then Dad, took them into the garage and was able to piece it back together.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm sure he used tools.
So when my bike was stolen, every summer they would give elementary school kids this. It was a little trifold, about, smaller than the size of a credit card thing, that said, say no to drugs, say yes to bowling. And
yeah.
It was like a deal where a local bowling alley teamed up with the Fargo Police Department, and to encourage kids not to do drugs, they would give them one free game of bowling every single day at one of the local bowling alleys.
Yep. Wiping out drugs, one game of bowling at a time.
Now, what was funny is on the front, it said, say no to drugs. And then you flipped one of the sides over and it said, say yes to bowling. But people would cut the no out. So the yes from the second page would come up. And so it would say yes to drugs.
That's tricky.
Yeah, that I was like, oh boy, we got some graphic designers growing
you have to
up.
Be careful with stuff like that. Like, I don't understand why people will still willingly do the whole, let me make a photo of me online where I'm holding up like a sheet of paper that's going to say whatever message I'm trying to communicate, because that immediately gets erased and rewritten.
Right.
And it looks totally real.
Yep. Like the convince me I'm wrong photo. Like that's been turned into just about everything. Or somebody who's like, hey, look, this is my diploma. Like, even if you take a picture with your diploma, people can, scratch that out and be like, hey, I just graduated from clown college. Honk, honk. So
what are your thoughts about people who clearly have like a desperate need to communicate their feelings to the outside world via bumper sticker?
Oh, I like it nowadays. I really like it.
You like it because I always feel like you're watching someone have like a slow meltdown.
Yeah.
With their bumper stickers.
I think here's the thing: tattoos and bumper stickers, you got to be sure, right?
Yeah,
when you put it on. Like we've improved technology, and sure, there's a way to get bumper stickers off, just like there's a way to get rid of tattoos, but you pay a price. Because if you've had a bumper sticker on, like, you know, most bumpers are made out of like plastic or, you know, like a rubberized plastic type thing now. If it's on there for, let's say, a summer, your car has faded slightly during that time. And so now forever it'll be a shape of, you know, Mike's Towing or whatever the bumper sticker's for. I think back in the day, bumper stickers came in one shape, and it was rectangular, and it told a story of who you were. And then all of a sudden we got these kind of die cut bumper stickers. And the thing that I always that drove me nuts was when it was Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes peeing on another logo. I'm like, both of these things were not paid for. Someone is profiting off of, you know, the hard work of both the Ford Motor Company and Bill Watterson, creator of Calvin and Hobbes.
There's also like Calvin praying to a cross.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, Bill Watterson never did any kind of like merchandising. This feels gross and weird and disgusting.
Right.
So, but that being said, you know what I really like is I like the ones where they're like, oh, it's pictures of Chewbaccas, and it shows what our whole family is, you know, like a daddy Chewbacca and a mommy Chewbacca, and then a couple little Chewbaccas, and then a dog Chewbacca. I like those. Sometimes they get too big, you know, like too big for their britches. I saw a student driver car yesterday that said TARDIS 1, and it had all these Doctor Who stickers on the back, and then one big one that said student driver. And I was like, so some ultra like Doctor Who fan is also teaching someone how to drive. So, you know, they're like, all right, well, you get in your car and you secure your extra long scarf so it doesn't get in your view, and let's get this thing going. All right, grab your, you know, toothbrushes or whatever Doctor Who has.
Yeah. When I was younger, I allowed myself to go down the political bumper sticker.
Oh, you did?
Route
Yeah.
During the Bush Kerry election. And so I had a Kerry sticker on the back. Only time that I can remember that I've put a political bumper sticker on my car. And that feeling of having to go take it off after your candidates lost the election is so depressing.
And some people don't. They just leave it on.
I just thought, I can't do this again. I don't want to go through this whole like scrape. Scrape. 4 more years of Bush. Scrape.
I bought my first car off the lot a year ago, and the first thing I did is I had my father-in-law pull the dealership emblem off my car. Because I was like, I don't want people knowing where I bought my car. It's none of their business. And I also want to be a walking, like, you know, billboard for this company. What if it turns out I don't like them? And it was amazing because he pulls his dealership emblems off too. And so he goes, oh, it's like this. And and it popped right off. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. No, you know, no discoloration, no goop underneath. But my license plate is still held in place with something that proclaims the dealership I bought my car from. So until I pony up the dough to replace that personally, you'll know where I got my car.
I bet there's some really good options on jeffbezos.com.
You know, there definitely are. Or, you know, maybe I just got to find like my favorite. Maybe I want to get a Ghostbusters one. I'll show a little bit of my personality.
Would you personalize it in some way? Is there a John Candy one?
Oh, that'd be great. With like an Uncle Buck quote on it or something.
Would there be if there was one of those, would there be one that would fit one of the characters or one of like a scene from one of the movies?
Yeah, I feel like you could get one from Spaceballs because they drove that like interstellar Winnebago. And I know that had like it had a phrase on the license plate. So maybe that'd be the one. Was
there any, because aren't they in a van in Home Alone?
Isn't it like a they're in van? A Ryder truck.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's a rental truck that they get in, which, by the way, would have been so cold. There would be no heating in the back of that thing.
Yeah,
be impossible. Okay, so I want to finish my thought though about going to the bowling alley. So I go to the bowling alley every single day when I'm in 6th grade because I have a friend and we get on our bikes and it's a 10-minute bike ride and we go and we bowl a game and it's awesome. It's one of those great things. It's just awesome.
You're just busy saying no to drugs.
Saying yes to bowling. And I got really good at bowling. Like, it felt good because bowling is technically a sport. technically. So one day I'm bowling and there's an older kid who's there all the time. And he was like, hey, you guys want to play a game of pool? And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds awesome. So he plays us in a game of pool and he goes, hey, you're pretty good. You want to play another game? I'll buy. And I'm like, oh, that sounds sweet. That sounds great. So then I play another game of pool. And when I get out there, my bike is gone.
Oh, no.
And this is the true crime, JJ, but I think that guy was working with a partner. And the partner was out there. They identified which bike was mine, which was awesome. It was a green mountain bike, and it had awesome, just like the best decals. And because it's JJ Gordon, I had a basket that was on the back. So it was like a rectangular basket so I could keep all my stuff in there, but it also made a seat. So if I needed to like bring someone else with, they could sit on that where the basket's strapped on. It was awesome.
That's choice.
Yeah, it was great. And I remember I was like, oh, I could fit a 6-pack of soda in this thing if I really wanted. So my bike is stolen. And then there comes the moment where it's like, well, I don't have like money. So I don't even have a way to like get a hold of my parents. It's the middle of the day, so I can't get a hold of my parents. So I end up walking home. My friend walks his bike and we walk home. And I wait for my parents to get home. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. My bike is gone. And so I told my parents that my bike had been stolen. And they, similar to how your dad was disappointed in you after your bike had been dismantled, my parents were disappointed in me because the only thing that was left was the bike tire, because I made the rookie mistake of not going to the frame, but going to the tire to lock it up.
Yeah. Yep.
And, so they drove me back to the bowler where we got the tire and the lock back. And I remember I didn't have a bike for like another month and a half. I think, I had to kind of do some chores around the house. And when you don't have a bike as a kid in a town like we grew up in, your mobility is cut off.
Yeah, that is your ticket to freedom at all.
Right. I mean, I rode that to go to the pool, to go down to the park to play, baseball. It was I took it to my friend's house. And this is the community we used to grow up in. We used to just leave our bikes in the front yard of whatever house we were at. So if I was with 3 friends, we would just all dump our bikes in the front lawn, and nobody thought about our bikes being stolen. It just wasn't a thing. And so after that moment, I started thinking like, I'm going to lock my bike up wherever I go. And so, everyone would dump their bikes in the front lawn. And if my friends had a lamp post, I chained my bike to a lamp post.
Right.
And that really was like when my innocence of realizing that someone could take something that I cherish so deeply away from me.
Yeah. Painful.
And since then I had one apartment in Chicago that was broken into, and they didn't steal anything, but they like messed everything up. Right?
Really? They just went around and destroyed stuff?
Yeah, just destroyed stuff. Just, tipped over a shelf, and I don't know if they're looking for something specific. But they certainly did not get anything good while they were in there.
Huh.
Let me think what else. I had a hotel room that was broken into when I was staying in Detroit one night. And again, they didn't, for whatever reason, they didn't take my luggage, but they rifled through a bunch of stuff. Am I marked? Are people looking at me being like, that guy's got a boatload of cash and some diamonds?
I am really interested in what must have played out when they stole Lil's car, because I mean, if they just drove it a few blocks and then got out of it and just got into another vehicle, like what was going on? Right. What were they even trying to do?
And that's my question too. Like, and it's a nice vehicle. Like we hear so much about people stealing catalytic converters, right? Getting underneath cars and sawing off chunks of it that they can use to sell for salvage. Mm-hmm. But in this case, nothing was missing. And in fact, they actually left stuff behind. So maybe they thought they were going to come back and get it. I mean, we could hypothesize a lot. The alcohol was involved is my first thought, because when you see where they parked spanning 2 spaces. So clearly they were parked like a bunch of jerks.
And they got caught on camera, you said, right?
Right. Now, that's the other thing too, is that the owner of this sports bar has to upload the footage to the Fargo Police Department to see if there's some way that they could identify it further. But we drove around a little bit looking to see if we could see this truck, white pickup truck that didn't have a front license plate, but we didn't find anything. I did go and I searched the parking lot to see, because my thought is if they got out of the car and then just threw the keys, right? You throw the keys down the parking lot just to be jerks, because men just want to see the world burn sometimes. I was like, maybe I'll find it. And then I got kicked out of the parking lot. The manager of the sports bar came and said, "Hey, why are you shadily walking around the parking lot, looking at all the cars, looking underneath cars? What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm JJ Gordon, junior detective. And I'm trying to solve the mystery of the missing keys." And because my thought is I will somehow find these keys and then everything's gonna be great. But that continued feeling of unrest, because someone does have those keys, and what if they're going to do it? Now, luckily, Lil has an OnStar system, and so OnStar disabled all electronics inside the car until Lil calls them back on Monday when the dealership can do it. So I guess that's the upside of technology, right? So he's fighting the fact that gosh, I wish I could just use my keys, just cut me a new key or get the car started. But he also has the ability to call a 1-800 number and they'll take care of him as far as missing, disabling the vehicle for the time.
So he had his full key ring though in the car. They got in and found he'd left the keys in it.
Yeah.
Okay. So they also got his house keys and everything else too.
Not his house keys for Fargo, which I think was the lucky thing. So
right. Yeah. Okay.
His house keys for another place that he hangs his head when he's at work.
Gotcha.
And then he was super bummed because also his gym fob was on there. And I was like, oh yeah, you can't even work out your aggression on the elliptical. But he's like, don't worry, they're going to be able to handle this. But
what's funny is that what's happened to him is something that I could totally have seen him doing at a previous age to someone else.
Right. Yep. Exactly. No. So I thought okay, so, and this isn't the first time he's had a vehicle stolen. I vividly remember the last time he had a vehicle stolen because I had internal hemorrhoids at the time that were causing me to have some bleeding out of my rear end. And while we were waiting at the Clay County impound lot, I was on the phone with Ask a Nurse being like, do I need to go in? And she's like, it could be rectal cancer. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Now, didn't you have an instance where either your car or Nilly's car, you saw someone in it, I think in Chicago while you were looking down from a building and then got down there and chased them or something? I
made a citizen's arrest back in the day. So thank you, Tucker, because you perfectly lined up the story that I wanted to get to in this, which is where the JJ Gordon Jr. detective comes from. Let's go all the way back to 2004. I go to Minneapolis, South St. Paul to shoot a short film with our good friend Jared Nillis, rest in peace, and his crew down there. I borrowed my mom's Bravada. And while I borrowed this Bravada, the deal was I could take it if I drove my sister down as well. So my sister and a friend of hers stay at a hotel so they can do some shopping at fancy stores. And then I take the Bravada to uptown Minneapolis. Jared lived in a gorgeous old kind of colonial style building that had these giant pillars in front. And it had a giant porch on the second floor just outside of their apartment. So we're all hanging out and we're getting these things ready. And the short film that we're making involves me as a crossing guard picking on a very nerdy version of Jake Harchie, who sends away from a bunch of cereal box tops to get a magic wand. and then he's able to turn my persona into a girl who's eating a chocolate bar, played by our friend Lauren Harris. So it's all shot on actual film. So it was a big deal because Jared was going to film school and he wanted to make this project. So I am dressed in galoshes, jeans, a reflective vest, and a do-rag. So somebody like leans in because I park across the street. It's a residential street, and then it's Hennepin Avenue is the next street over. So there's a line of businesses, and one of those businesses was a Domino's, and we used to park in the Domino's parking lot, even though you weren't supposed to. So I'm parked in the Domino's parking lot, which is a perfect view. Like you're looking across the street and down from that porch, and someone goes, JJ, there's someone inside your car. And so we all come over and we're looking like, nah, you must just be, you've had one too many. So a couple minutes later, someone goes, JJ, there's someone definitely inside your car. So then we look and we're all looking and we're just waiting, holding our breath. And there's a dozen of us. And certainly all of a sudden there's somebody leans from the back seat into the front seat. And they're like, oh my God, there's somebody in the car. And so as a group, we go, let's get them. Which is stupid, right? Because we don't know who this person is. So we all run down the stairs and people have grabbed different types of weapons like a pipe wrench or a stop sign that we had bolted onto a mop handle that we were going to use for this short film. And so as we get to the base and we're like, hey, get out of that car. The guy gets out and he runs, and he is identifiable because he is wearing a long blue parka. And the guy takes off and he runs across Hennepin Avenue in uptown Minneapolis, almost gets hit by a car, and the car, all the traffic all screeched to a stop. And they're like, oh, that was close. A guy just ran into traffic. But then 15 other guys run across the street, and some of them are dressed up like a wizard. And it must have looked weird. So he darts back and gets kind of lost in the residential area behind a London Byerly's restaurant. Grocery store, Kowalski's restaurant or grocery store. And so we all split up and we all go in different directions. And I'm not, an athletic person. So like I ran as far as I could. And then I was like, you guys, you just get them. You keep going. So we all split apart, and then I'm just walking around, like darting around. And then under a street lamp, I see the blue parka. And so I kind of hurry myself across the street. I walk up and I'm like, hey, like you just robbed, my car. You broke into my car. Give me my stuff back. And we hadn't stopped to see what it had, but we did see when we were running by that he had broke the back window. And that's how he gained entry to the car. There used to be a place in uptown Minneapolis, a restaurant called like Figlio, that had the most delicious, most amazing food ever. And I had a takeout box from Figlio that is now covered in like shattered glass. So I think that's what I was mainly mad about, is that my leftovers were now bunk and I couldn't eat it. So he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Out of nowhere, Jared gets up he comes out of nowhere, out of the shadows. And he's like, dude, you broke into that car. Give me my stuff back. And then Jake Harchie shows up out of nowhere. And I was like, let's let the cops decide. And when I say let's let the cops decide, this guy turns and bolts. Now, Jake had been like, guys, don't just blame this guy. It might not. He says he's not the one who broke in. And I'm like, stop with your bleeding heart crap. This guy's wearing a full length blue parka. He fits the description of the perp. So this guy bolts and he starts running again. And Jared, who's very athletic and can, run like nobody's business, is trailing this guy by about, probably like 12 feet during this entire run. He's running. This guy jumps a fence. Jared jumps a fence. This guy goes down the street. Jared goes down the street. This guy goes to jump another fence. And thank goodness this is what happens. Like when someone is going to jump, they're at full run and they jump and they're going to use their momentum to carry them over the fence. Uh-huh. Well, this guy did that, but his momentum didn't realize that, this is the fence gate. And so he hit it with all his might, and the gate swings all the way open, hits the wall, and the guy goes down. Jared grabs him. So I get up behind him, like a couple minutes later, and we perp walk this guy arm in arm all the way to the Super America and this is, at this point, we're talking like 2:00 in the morning. So all the bars are getting out. And so people are coming into the Super America to get, their like hot dogs and, like late night food. And, I'm here being like, this guy broke into my car. We caught him. We ran him down. We got him. And so the police show up to the Super America and they interview us and they interview this guy and they're like, can you identify him? We're like, yeah, we can. And all of our buddies have given up their chase and their search and they're coming in the Super America and they're like, oh, you got him. So all of these guys are confirming that this is the guy they saw break into my car and, take off. So then the police are like, okay, so they put this guy in custody. They search all of his pockets and there's nothing in him. Like this guy didn't take the little pink iPod mini that was in the car. I don't know what he was looking for. But at this point, he actually hadn't stolen anything from the car. He had just broken into it. Maybe if he had more time, who knows? So they say, what is the price of the back window of the car? And I said, well, I don't know. And they're like, because if it's over $200, he is kept in lockup until Monday because it's at that point, like more than $200 is a gross misdemeanor or whatever. And
changes the severity of the crime.
Right, exactly. So it's not just like a book them and release them type deal.
Right.
So I said, I don't know. And they're like, I mean, you could throw us an estimate. You're the one who, it's your car. So you tell us how much it's worth. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know anything about glass. And they're like, do you think it's worth more than $200? And I was like, I mean, there's some labor. And they're like, do you think it's worth more than $200? And I was like, oh, yes, I think it's worth more than $200. And they're like, great. So they book this guy. And I have to wake my mom up at 2:30 in the morning. And I do the classic, like, she's like, hello. And I'm like, okay, first of all, Mom, nobody's hurt. Someone broke into your car. We recovered everything. There's just a bunch of glass inside. Again, nobody's hurt. I ran down a criminal with my friends and we made a citizen's arrest. And she's like, what? And I'm like, we made a citizen's arrest and I took care of it. And she's like, where's the car now? And I'm like, well, it's still sitting over there. She goes, and nobody's watching it. So you just have a car that's open to the world. And I was like, oh, shit. Didn't even think about that. I was too busy playing MacGyver over here. So we go over and we go to the car. And I was like, okay, so let's take everything out of the car so that there's nothing in there that's any value. And I was like, would one of you guys let me use, the parking lot at one of your businesses, like some place that you work that's safe? And one of them's like, yeah, I work at a coffee shop that's 24/7. It's well lit. I'll tell the manager that you're parking there and we'll take care of it. So the only downside of this is when we have to drive home, it is early spring, so it's cold out. What are we going to do to cover up this window? Mm-hmm. And so, like I told you earlier, my sister and her friend were staying at a hotel. So we stole a pillow from the hotel and like shoved it into this thing. And I remember like riding in the backseat on the way home and using that pillow to sleep on. And a couple years later, I kind of realized, like, we stole a pillow from the hotel, and like that doesn't seem right. It does, we committed a crime,
right? But also, why a pillow and not just a towel?
Oh, because it was the back window, and so we needed something big. That was going to be. Yeah, it wasn't like it's not like he broke enough for his hand to get in there. It's the whole back window.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. And
was it loud too?
Was it what?
Loud?
No, the pillow deafened the sound. In fact, I really feel like GMC and Chevy should listen to this idea about having like a pillow window. I think that we'd all be much happier if we had that ability to,
Is it really a window at that point?
I mean, if we can see through it. So let's get see-through pillow technology going right now, and we can go for it. It And you know what? My mom decided like we got the window fixed in the Bravada, and I don't remember how much it was. And a couple of weeks later, I got a letter from the city of Minneapolis congratulating me on my citizen's arrest, and they thanked me for the help. Again, what a stupid idea. This person could have had a knife, could have had a gun, could have been, this person could have been in a position where in their life they were desperate enough to break into a vehicle, and they could have been desperate enough to do anything else. So, that was stupid of us. I would never recommend that to somebody. It's just like the same way that they say, don't be a hero. Like if someone's robbing a convenience store, you give them the money, because we can always, that's what insurance is for.
Right.
Don't stick up for a pack of Slim Jims and $80. That's not worth it.
Of course. Yeah, that's definitely not worth it.
And I've had my identity, or I've had someone like hack my credit card twice. And somehow that doesn't feel as much of an invasion. And I actually blame myself more than, the people who are even doing that. But it still is someone stealing from me. And luckily, my credit card company was like, yeah, we'll reverse the charges, and you won't be liable for them.
That's something that's actually never happened to me before so far. Knock on wood. I think this desk is made of wood.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
You're obviously not, you're not someone who is patronizing a lot of shady internet sites like I am.
That's true.
I'm
not really going out there and just giving my social security number willy-nilly to people. I worked with this guy once. I won't say his name because it's so fucking stupid that he did this. We were on the road for video production work, and he fell victim to one of those scams where they call you and they say, listen, this is the IRS calling, and you owe whatever, and we need you to pay it over the phone to us right now. Otherwise, you're going to be arrested. And I'm not kidding you. They basically told him you have to go to a Walmart and you have to buy a bunch of like
gift cards
or phone cards or whatever, and then pay us with that. And he's like, okay. And so he's in an Uber driving to a Walmart during that trip is when he realizes, hey, this might be a scam. But at that point, he had already given them his credit card number, his social security number, his bank account number. It's all these other things. And then it's in the car ride, he's like, wait a minute, why do they need Walmart gift cards? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And then ends up hanging up and has to change basically his identity almost at that point. But I also had to give him shit because I was like, that's fucking dumb, dude. That's really dumb. That's super dumb. How did you get to this point? And he was like, I don't know how I fell for it, but I just did.
I think the thing is when you get that call, right? When you get the call that this is someone, and they're like, don't hang up. And they know any amount of information about you, right? So, if they're like, hello, is this Trent? And you're like, yeah, and they're like Trent, and then they give you your last name and you reside at this address. It seems legit, right? And then you get afraid, and then you're like, I don't want to go to jail. Like, this sounds awful. Because I have gotten a call from someone who identifies himself as a police officer, and I go, okay, yeah, whatever. And I hang up. And then 4 minutes later, I get a knock on the door, and there's actual cops there, and they're pissed that I hung up on them because they were looking for a friend of mine. And I was like, I'm sorry. I mean, like, you don't trust anyone over the phone these days. And I'm like, and you didn't call me, you called me from a number that when I called it, if I called it back, doesn't ring into the police department. It rings into like a cell phone.
Right. Now we live in the days where if I'm getting a phone call and I don't have the number in my phone already, I'm not answering that call.
Do you Google it sometimes? Like if you're sitting in front of the computer, do you ever look at that and like, okay, I'm going to Google this real quick?
I will if I'm getting a call, multiple calls from the same number.
Yeah.
Just because then I want to see, okay, is this a number that's being reported? Because then if you see that it isn't, or even if you search the number, you might actually find the legit business it's coming from.
Sure.
At that point, and you go, okay, now I know who this is. But that is almost never the case. I mean, anytime someone I know is calling me, my first thought is, what's wrong?
Yeah, like right. Like, why didn't they text message me?
Why the only person who, if I'm getting a sudden phone call from, would be like my sister, then I'd be like, oh, cool. She wants to say hi and show, do a video chat with Dane or something. That makes sense. Everyone else, it's like, what's wrong?
One of my favorite phone calls of all time is that friend of mine that ran down the actual like break-in criminal called me, and I knew he was coming to Fargo, and he was going to take the bus from Chicago to Fargo to come home for the Thanksgiving holiday. And he called and he goes, "Hey, Spider-Man." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "It's really good to talk to you, Spider-Man. Listen, I met a kid who I'm going to about to get on the bus, and he's with me, and he doesn't believe that I'm best friends with Spider-Man." And he goes, "So I'm just going to hand him the phone real quick." And so I was like, "Oh, I get what he's doing." And so I hear, "Spider-Man, is that you?" And I'm like, "Hey, buddy, what's up?" And he goes, "It's Spider-Man." And he goes, "Spider-Man, come here right now." And I'm like, "Oh, I can't. I got to fight Doc Ock. He's trying to steal from the bank." And he's like, oh, use your web slingers. And I'm like, "Good idea, buddy." And
That's
so
adorable.
and like at this point, we're talking like this has been like 16, 17 years. I wonder what happened to that kid. And because that this kid gloated for the next like month that he talked to Spider-Man.
I want to know then how that Jared must have seen the kid with a Spider-Man t-shirt on or something.
Well, I think Jared himself was wearing a Spider-Man t-shirt.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and
Jared's someone that would have had the lanky build to fill out a Spider-Man costume pretty nice.
Perfect. He would have been perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it was a missed opportunity that he didn't Andrew Garfield himself into one of those things.
I want to say, I think it was at Chrissy's, was it her 21st where we got the party bus that someone threw a rock through the window?
Oh, I see. I forgot about that. That was Chrissy's 21st birthday. Yes, it was.
That was her 21st. And I remember like I was even sober that night. I remember, even though we were all on a party bus, I was just drinking sodas for whatever reason. And as we're all trying to get back on the party bus at the end of the night outside of Mix, some guys who wanted to get on the bus who weren't with us were causing a ruckus and arguing with some of our friends. And at one point, one of them grabs this giant chunk of concrete. Most of us are in the party bus at this point. Throws it through the windshield. And the first thing I hear is the bus driver himself go, "Get that fucker!" And the bus empties out, except for me and a few other people. And the guy's buddy just gets grabbed right away by one of our friends and is just standing like, "Hey, listen, I didn't do that. My buddy's an idiot." The guy runs away, but the rest of our friends track him down. I get on the phone with the police, and I'm like, "Yeah, we're at Mix. This happened. They just chased the guy down." They send one cop over who, instead of going to find the guy and our friends who have been chasing after him, he just starts taking photos of the bus.
Yeah.
And then our friends are walking back with the guy in tow, and the guy's face is all bloodied up. And the cop goes, "What happened to him?" And one of them goes, "He fell." And that's all. The cop goes, "Okay," and takes the guy. And so that wasn't a theft, but that was also like a violation, a destruction. Like we all had to get, I can't remember. I mean, the bus couldn't drive at that point because it had no windshield.
Right.
I can't even remember what they did, if they sent another bus or if we all had to do something else. I can't remember how we all got.
I think they sent another bus.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken. Because like the driver at one point was like, "Well, I could drive if I just stick my head out the window." And I think at that point, and also don't forget, that was the same night that the same guy who just had his car stolen put his hands up by like in fists by his mouth, and then his hands started to shake, and then he threw up a bunch of onions on himself.
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, he threw up onions on himself.
What was he mad at?
I don't think he was mad at anything. I think that he, in fact, was just like, he got on and he's like, "Well, this would be a good time to puke."
I would hate to drive a party bus for a job.
No, thank you. Yeah. No, never.
No, thank you. Ugh.
In fact, I can't. I gotta be honest. Let's be honest. Have you ever really loved a party bus experience?
That's the only time I was on one, I think, as a guest. Every other time I've ever been one was if, say, I got hired to film someone's wedding and they want the camera person to go in the party bus with between the ceremony and the reception, sometimes the bridal party is going to go to do shots at a bar or something with the party bus. So I've been on there for that, and no, I've never had a good time.
See, to me, like there's always a bunch of yelling. There's never good, clear communication. Someone has to take the role of being like the adult who informs the driver where to go and how to get there. And that usually is me anyway. I just have never really enjoyed a party bus experience.
Well, what really is so amazing and fun that's happening there? If anything, you're just going, well, I'm doing the same bar activities inside this vehicle. But even that's for short, limited amounts of time.
No, I did not care for it. And I don't
imagine it if they made you get on and just buckle up. And it was just like, no, a party bus is merely safe transit to a party.
The word bus is in here. Okay. This is how we get you. It's an efficient way of moving multiple people like at the same time. Well, Tucker, it's time to wrap this up. The feeling of being violated by a thief, a crook, someone who has stolen something from you. And I just don't understand. I don't understand stealing. And I've never been in a position where I've needed to like steal, like where I actively am like, I'm going to just take this from someone.
Right. Except when you pirate stuff.
Right, exactly. Unless you count that. But that, let's be honest, then I get to be a pirate. And I'm not a thief. Yeah. I'm a pirate. And that's a whole different ball of wax. Okay, so that does it for this episode of JJ Meets World. I've got to go out and solve some more crimes. If you're interested, the JJ Gordon Jr. Detective Agency is available. If you think that your spouse is cheating on you, no joke, I've always wanted to be a PI. I think I'd be a really good private investigator, except for the fact that everybody knows me in this town. And they'd be like, hey, why are you at this motel? And I'd be like, I'm checking up on you. And they're like, oh, that sucks. And then my career would be over. But I want a trench coat and I want a huge lens on a camera. That's really all I want. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. If I was going to steal something, I would sneak into Tucker's house at night and I would steal his clothing and then commit a bunch of crimes, and they'd be like, I can identify that. That's definitely Tucker Lucas's hoodie.